Well, welcome to Real Wealth Podcast. This is Mike Proctor here with my friend Rodney Elliott. He also happens to be my pastor and, well, former pastor now,
Yeah.
because he was recently promoted to the executive pastor for all campuses for Pathway Church,
Yep.
which is that the biggest church here in Wichita?
Probably not. It's definitely up there though, for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Certainly one of the biggest ones. in
Yes,
Wichita.
for sure. Top 3 or 4.
Yeah. And so anyways, I've loved attending Pathway Goddard here for the last 4 years. And so there's been some succession happen, and David's come in and he's running the campus or the Goddard campus now. And you're stepping into a role from Pastor Larry. And so I am really excited to have you on today so we can talk a little bit about how to live the best life possible with the time we have left and hear the startup story of the Goddard campus, because you were there through it all. And you've grown this baby into how many regular attendees are
Yeah,
there?
we pre-COVID over 1,100 every
Wow.
weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine that many go through that building. I mean, it doesn't look big enough to hold 1,100.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. It's like there's a scale thing we had to do with a lot of services. And, COVID has definitely changed that because
Right.
people go online and stuff. So we're probably about 70% now where we were before on a weekend. But it has been, that growth you talk about. It was 10 years that I was the campus pastor at Goddard, just recently handed it off to David Integrin. And it was really a story of startup and then scaling, and that starting up is really hard. And I tell people scaling, I felt was harder. It really was. And so just kind of going through that journey was definitely something that for all of us, I think looking back, it was like, wow, we made it, but it had a lot of pains and bumps along the way for sure.
Yeah, I bet so. And the other thing that's really amazing to me is you can get somebody, and this is to your, the Lord's credit, but to your giftings. There's very few people that are able to go in and start something and then see it through the scaling process, because that startup energy is so different than figuring out how to work and grow and mold and get to where the Goddard campus is.
Yeah, for sure. I think number one, all credit to Jesus. That's for sure. Because I said at every step, and I think knowing business owners, it's like the same thing. You start up a business, you feel over your head, right?
Oh yeah.
And so it's a act of faith. And so starting the Goddard campus was a big act of faith for us. You had to have all the resources in place, the people, and then it's like belief. Belief in God, and then belief in the people you're doing it with when you start something up. Strategy is super important, but I found belief in the strategy was way more important than a perfect strategy. And so as we kind of got started, we kept hitting ceilings in that 10 years where it was kind of like, wow, what we were doing before would kind of not work because we weren't good at in church. Really, what you're trying to do is connect people to one another. That's the name of the game. And the larger you get, the more difficult it is, where people can feel like, their spiritual needs are being met. They're connected to other people. We have the things that are really going to help them and their families grow in their faith. And when you're small, it's a lot easier, And so when we started, we were like 230 people. And every time you grew 150 or 200 people along the journey, it was like not just one thing needed to be tweaked. Everything almost had to change.
Right.
And it really, I think as the leader, I was telling a church planter this a couple weeks ago, as I said, you just have to be really open to what got you here is not going to get you to the next place.
Preach.
And you have to be willing to go learn from other people. And so sometimes what happens is the pride, I found that whenever we'd hit a ceiling in that journey, my pride would get in the way, and it's like, I got this. I know how to do it. Right. And, it was like, I remember praying one time driving home. I was like, God, I know how to do this, but it ain't working anymore. And I felt like the Holy Spirit told me, you knew how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how to do the next leg of the journey. You better find somebody that I've put in your life that can do that. And so I was always trying to find people that were ahead of me. And I couldn't find them inside of Pathway Church because but we had never launched campuses before. So everybody'd be like, they're not really sure how to do that.
That
so
was the first campus. I forgot about that.
Yep. So yeah, it was the first campus outside of our original one. So there were lessons you could learn from other people, but it was really a whole different ball game. Nobody'd ever had first for 3.5 years, we were portable. We were in a high school. And then we had to go through a building process and all these kinds of things and trying to think about how we were going to do this when we moved from a high school into a building. And most time people would look at me like, I don't know. I haven't ever done that. So I went, through some networks of people. There were some great people along the way that kind of helped me and I learned. And then I always feel like the people that you need and the wisdom that you need, if you can get the right people in the room, it's there. And I found that in the lay volunteers and a lot of great business leaders who are at our campus, some people who have led some really big things here in our local community that helped me understand from their perspective when they were dealing with growth, how to scale. And then I had to think it through from a church perspective. And so I actually found more help because lots of pastors haven't ever experienced what I did. And so I found a lot of help from the business community about, layers of leadership and really delegation of not just responsibility, but authority to go out and make decisions. So that was the greatest lid I think that I experienced was when all the authority was accumulated in one spot to make decisions as we needed to go. It's just the lid for your growth. And so you have to have trusted people that you delegate and really they're coming to you for help, not for decision making, and man, I mean, that was a long, what I've just described in like 3 or 4 minutes was like a painful 5, 6, 7 year journey for me, really. So,
right. And I'm sitting here thinking, it's like, man, you just like laid it all out there. I don't know what we're going to talk about now.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of ins and outs of that for sure. But yeah, it was, looking back and, even going into my new role, as the executive pastor, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, I'm trying to have the spirit of, man, I did that, but I don't know how to do this. And so I have some thoughts, but how do I gather wisdom from other people? And then also know that the people on the team who have been on the team, like the answers are here, and God will show us. So I don't have to know everything at this moment because I definitely don't.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. I try not to timestamp it, but the sermon this last Sunday was really great when he was talking about how the Israelites coming out of Egypt and Moses and all that, and it's such an impactful story of just step by step faith.
Yep, for sure, yeah.
And yeah, kudos to you for leaning on business owners that were in the congregation that could help, that have been there from a business perspective, and then be able to take their frameworks and apply it to a different organization, church. But a lot of even in the nonprofit side, things may fundamentally or functionally work different. But really, you're working with people and organization, and it should all cross over pretty well.
Yeah, people are people. And so it's especially, business leaders who I would say lead from a place of faith, man, I heavily lean on because their ministry is their business, right? That's how they see their people. They're trying to care for them. They're trying to grow. They're trying to create more opportunity. And so anybody that thinks like that can help a pastor like me, and especially as you think about trying to build systems, sometimes everybody talks about that as a dirty word in church. Systems are simply a way that we organize and care for people, inside the church. That's all it is. So it's not a dirty word. It's a stewardship thing. It's really what it is God has given us these people, so in a business, God's given you employees. So we build systems and things so that they're cared for. Things can work efficiently. People don't get frustrated. And we create a culture where people and we're far from perfect. And so you know how it is. It's like, it's not something you can put in place. That's why scaling is difficult. Because I believe the lie that, man, once I got this lined out and I got this system built, we're good to go forever, right?
Right.
And I was like, no, it only works. It's got about I actually think it's shorter than I thought. I was like, it'll probably get me a year and a half or 2 years. And then we're going to have to either majorly rework it or take a stick of dynamite to it and just start over, and that's a painful thing. I mean, it can be exhausting if you don't have a lot of people in the game with you trying to figure out how to do it. So.
Right. Well, and the reality is with any organization, if your organization gets stuck at a certain size, it is kind of easy in a way because you don't have to keep reinventing systems because they work and they do what they were designed to do. But then once you start removing those roadblocks or the speed bumps, then, it picks up some speed and then you got to deal with what you're dealing with the growth. And
for sure.
Absolutely. And that's how business works. And if you ever want to stay at the same spot, don't change anything.
Yep. Well, and I would say if you want to stay at the same place, don't change anything. But eventually the diminishing returns are coming your way because the world is changing around you. And so even staying the same
doesn't work well.
It just doesn't work. And it's like, there's a part of me, I wish it would, every turn I'm like, I wish this was the thing. This was the system. And we're like, we can just like operate it and be done. But it's just like, nah, you gotta be curious too about what is I grew up, really my training and background is on a family farming operation and it's a large one. And so it's a big business. And the thing we always talk about in the farming world, whether it's in crop production or just in profit loss kind of things is, just like what's your most limiting factor? It's not what you want to fix, but what do you have to fix to take you to the next level? And so that's kind of something with our team. We always try to think about is what is holding us back that really, if we could go after that one thing, like everything else is important, but what's that one thing? And to me, I think I've called that before. My scaling mindset is what is the most limiting factor that we can go after. And I remember when we moved into the building, you were there for that, I believe.
I don't think I was.
Maybe not. Well, when we moved into the building, it's kind of like you always think like it's like a new location and it's a great location. You're just like the location will take care of everything itself. And so I believe that. I've believed a lot of lies I've told myself in this journey. You're like, yeah, I think what we have will work just fine for a while. And it helped initially, but then we actually saw, the systems we had just weren't, it was too frantic. And we really couldn't connect people with the way we were caring for people the way it was. And it took about a year and a half. And it was the hardest. That's why I was like, starting up is really hard, But when you're taking something like we were probably at about 550 or 600 people every weekend, probably had 30 or 40 what we call small groups of people that are really there to care for people. I thought we were probably good to go, but it's like, man, 650 and then we went right back to 550 and we couldn't move. It's like you just wouldn't grow. And people you could just tell weren't feeling connected and cared for. And I felt disheartened because you're like, we did this and we've got this great asset now that we didn't have. And I can't figure out how to move it, and I remember praying. I was like, you think as a leader, I remember praying and asking God, maybe I'm not the guy that can maybe I got us to this part, but I can't take us any further, and it was like we were stuck there for about a year and we had the best. I mean, we had everything we've ever wanted and we couldn't move it, and for some reason, like I was like, God, like, did we misunderstand what you wanted us to do? And so everybody asked me in the 10 years, I've had a lot of reflection over the last couple months. People are like, what was the hardest part? And I said, well, early I had when things kind of dipped a little bit and it was hard and couldn't move and the startup energy kind of drained, you know, you're like driving home and you're just like, man, I don't know if I want to do that again next week. It's too hard. So I'd say that moment was hard, but actually that middle moment when we got everything we dreamed of and want, and then it wasn't really like going like gangbusters. It's like, that was the hardest part for me because I really questioned if I could go further, take it any more down the track than I already had.
So you're saying the church on the outside didn't have as much impact as the church on the inside?
Yeah. Anytime you would say, I think it's like anytime you sell yourself that a location or a building is going to change your culture and take care of everything, you're just lying to you. I mean, it doesn't work that way because anything that's built around people is built on the people.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the gospel. Like the temple is not the building any longer. The temple is the people. That's what the scriptures teach us. And it's so funny how we forget that. But it's funny when you talk to business people, like they forget that as well, right? It's like, if I could just get that location, and if it's the most limiting factor, it might help you a little bit, but really it's all about people. It's about culture. It's about connection and leadership. And the truth was that, when I was asking that, am I the guy? The reality was that was the right question because we had a leader problem. And the problem for me was I was the leader.
Right.
So
yeah.
So it's like, over a couple months, I just kind of had to be honest with people that I'm just not sure. But then, when we started trying to really attack the most limiting things, we actually, everybody would say this was the greatest lesson I think I learned is 2 years, we got into the building. So the church about doubled going to the building, which everybody, it's like, that's great. But then it just like stopped for like a year. And going through that, I was just like, what in the heck? Like it should be, even I'd have people going like, man, I thought you'd be bigger. I had some people tell me that and you're just like, yeah, me too.
Right.
Me too. And so what we did was I ended up, I didn't know what else to do. I talked to some pretty wise people who had done this. And I just pulled a big group of our leaders together and we really just went through, okay, what are those limiting factors? What's holding us back? And as they said, well, we need more opportunities for people to serve. We need more opportunities for people to attend because the building is awesome. But it's like what was happening is we'd get to about 75, 80% capacity. And you know how a full room and all that, it's just like you can't connect with each other. You need more space, you need more time. You don't want your lobby packed. And so what we decided to do was really aggressively launch other service times, which at one point we were running 5 services in one day.
Yeah.
And so it was a deal. What happened was, and I think the greatest lesson is we actually made more owners of the church. Like, this is my place by elevating new leaders that were over all of those services, that really cared for those people, that were inviting people to come to those. And then it was like, my role changed dramatically because I was really a leader of the leaders more than I'd ever been before. And so I had distance from the people, which some people will tell you in a church that's bad, but actually it was really good because then it was more, there were people that were caring for, rather than me trying to care for this 500 person flock, we divided it up where we really had pastors of the services and they had 100 people, but they had a team that was doing that. And then at that point, it was kind of like we launched one. And then we were like, holy cow, this works. Can we launch another one? And then instead of just thinking, could we launch another one? We were like, well, let's just launch two at the same time. And when we did that and we created more owners where people really felt like, it wasn't the staff's church, it wasn't a core group of leaders. They really had influence over it that what happened was they just became evangelists in their own lives. They started sharing with people, you got to come to my service. And it was something, it was incredible. So at that point, like we had our best year, like right before COVID, it's funny. For 2 years, we had the best growth we ever had in a time when experts in the church world would say you shouldn't have it then. Like it should have diminished.
What are you really doing over there, Rodney?
It's really what it really was it was just like, man, you got to enlist, train, and release leaders at such a high level, and you create more owners. And then what happens is they own the mission more than you do sometimes. That's what got shocking. And so it was crazy. And then, COVID's even had us, we're trying to figure our strategy. Everything's changed for everybody in some ways, but the principle of creating and releasing leaders that are really owners of the mission outside of what I would call core leadership, it's still working. It may not look like multiple services because in person is more difficult now. It just is. People are trained different, but man, for us, it's like that's the secret sauce. And if you think about it, that's what Jesus himself did, right? Is he trained 12 and he actually just released them and he created a movement. Like he didn't feel like he had to have his arms around every aspect of his business, of changing the world. He actually gave it away. And it's so fun. I'm like, it is the most simple concept ever, right? But it is so hard to live that way because I think our pride gets in the way most of the time of that. And it takes a lot of humility to do that,
So somewhat what I hear you saying is to grow, to be able to scale, you've got to have the humility to pass authority on, to delegate well, and really create owners within the organization, which principles that work in business as well. I mean, those are principles, and it will carry over. That'll work, and that's awesome. But also, it's like that humility piece and keeping your heart right is also probably a struggle too, because it's really easy to turn around and say, "Man, look what I've done," and
oh yeah. Yeah. If you wait for your motives to be 100% pure, you'll never do anything, but you always have to check them as well. And that's what I mean. The pride. I mean, whenever you hit a ceiling, you have to, I always thought, I was like, what it is I'm starting to take too much credit again for it. And I want to consolidate. I don't know why it is, but I think we as people, because we want to be so important, is consolidating the power and the success into ourselves is what we all want. And that's true of pastors. That's true of CEOs. That's true of everybody. And so it's like where the power is. And, this is the power is in the gospel and the mission, And so inside the church, it's obvious. It's what Jesus called us to do. That's the power. It ain't you. And so he's given you as a steward. You're the one that's going to lead and empower people and point people to that. But man, it's so deceptive when you start taking too much credit for it. And what's amazing is when you confront people. So I have, when people do this, some friends of mine, who I'm just like, man, I think your head, I don't know if you could fit through a door right now. I mean, like you think you're pretty awesome. And I have an arrogance problem. I can confess that. Like confidence is never my problem. The dark side of confidence is arrogance. And so what happens is I start believing it's me and it's not us. And when I start thinking it's me, I don't value people. I don't release them. I don't empower them. And even inside, it creates weird turf wars inside of the organization. And it's just something that always has to be spoken into the reality. Like it can't just be something everybody knows and feels. Like it's like, hey, I think you think a little more highly of yourself than you ought. That's the scripture, and I have to have people in my life tell me that because I'm blind to it. I mean, I just all of a sudden something good will happen and everybody wants to talk to you about it. What are you doing? What are you doing? And you have enough of those, you're just like, it was me. And the reality was, well, maybe you made a good decision as the leader to change something, but it's a whole bunch of people that make it happen. And anytime you think your role is more important than theirs, you're headed to the dark side. I mean, it just is. And you see people all the time do that in every arena of life. And that's ultimately what it is, man, I think it comes down to, we don't feel like we need people to tell us how valuable we are, which there's a healthy side to that. We are all valuable. But then when you start believing your own press all the time, you've lost perspective on who you truly are,
So you're saying it's important to have great advisors around you that you listen to.
That will be honest.
That will be honest. Okay.
Yeah, that will tell you the stuff that you don't want to hear. Like I have 2 or 3 people in my life that I'm like, even if after a month, it's kind of like the when we've been kind of hanging out, I'm like, man, you've been just telling me how great I am for a while. I really don't need more of that. Like, it's hard to find people who are honest with you. And so, one of the things I did in my going into my new role, which was so good, like I underestimated how good it was going to be. And actually our outgoing executive pastor, Larry Wren, we talked about it and he goes, yeah, I think you ought to do that. That's you. Is I met one-on-one with every single staff person. And I tried to tell him, it's like, my number one core value is open honesty that is fast, so that the feedback loop doesn't take 6 months. Because as a leader, if it takes 6 months for bad news to get to you, it's too late.
That's grown a lot of legs by then.
Yeah. And in a lot of places, it's just like, we don't want to tell the leader what they don't want to hear, especially about themselves. And so what I told them was, I said, I want to hear what your concerns are about me going to, what are like your fears, concerns? And I said that, what are some things like in my reputation, if you haven't worked close to me, that concern you? And, man, I was so grateful. I love those people because they were all so honest with me. It made me convinced like I got the right, we got the right team at our church, because some of them said, when you really want to go somewhere, you don't listen well. And I'm like, yep, I do that. And so when I looked at them, I said, yeah, I do that. That's good. What else you got? And I said, they're like, well, when things don't go well, it was kind of this repetition. When things don't go well, this is who you can become, right? And you tend to run over people that are in your way. I was like, yeah. And then I remember looking at the person, I say, if you see me do that, would you have the courage to come and tell me? Because I need people, like I need people at every level that are going to make me self-aware. And man, I mean, I've already had people do that. I hope I can, I'm early in this transition, but I hope that they'll continue to do that. And it's really on me to keep that conversation going and be open when they come tell me things, because man, right now I feel like even going into a new role, because I had those conversations, and I'm grateful for Larry for encouraging me to do that. I'm grateful that they were open and honest with me, that what it's like, I have, even though I haven't done the job, I have a feel for the organization that is like, man, I really kind of know things, and I just can't lose it. That's the problem. Is like, I could get distracted and lose that once I start having to really do stuff. But if you can have that feedback from key advisors, but even like on your teams, man, if you can have that, man, it's like, it is a treasure. It is, when I look at a person, when they tell me something really hard about me, it hurts. Like when somebody said, you run over people, I was just like, man, that was a little too direct.
You familiar with the Enneagram?
Yes. Yeah.
What type are you?
I'm an 8.
Yep.
So
I bet that hits you right in the heart.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't want to, in some ways, like direct, open, and honest is what I want, but people don't understand about 8s is we're sensitive on the inside, even though it doesn't look like it on the outside.
Big old front.
Yeah. So for me, what the power was also to train myself. When I was like, I'm going to ask for it. I need to receive it well. And I need to look at that person. And I just remember telling them, I love people that do that for me. And so I was like, that hurt, but I was like, you can't imagine how much I love and respect you right now. And so it really does. And I think the fear, I was telling a friend this, and he goes, are you afraid you're going to get too much feedback? And I go, nope, that never happens.
You want it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because and this isn't an Enneagram podcast. In fact, I don't even think I've brought it up on any of the other ones yet.
Yeah.
But I love the Enneagram.
Yep.
And I'm a 1-wing 9.
Yeah. I could see that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, what's interesting is if you're not a type 8, you don't appreciate that 8s expect that force pushed back on them, and they feel that's relationship building and intimacy. And
the debaters. Yeah. That's what we are, is like, yeah. And so when people are telling me I run over them, that's part of the education that I also have to do, because I need to amp it down, right? Probably overly direct sometimes, but also to understand when I'm pushing on your idea, it's because I actually think it's good. When you have bad ideas, I don't push. I'm just like, okay, but if it's a good idea, I really lean in and I start asking questions about it. And so when people sometimes think it's part of how you have to educate people to who you are and how you are, but then also have enough self-awareness so that if I do run over somebody, and this happened 2 weeks ago, somebody walks in my office who I'd have that conversation with, and they're like, you kind of did that thing in the meeting. And I was like, you know what? I did that thing in the meeting. And so the next meeting, the cool thing was I pointed at that person. They came to me and told me I did that. And I just want to say I'm sorry. And that is awesome. Like, way to go. That's the win. And so for people, especially if they're unsure about it, that's one thing I've learned about a transition. If they're unsure, man, it's the time. There's a great opportunity to drop the shields as well. So people aren't as afraid in the beginning as you might think they are, especially if you're willing to go connect with them relationally. And so it really is on me as the leader, though, to keep that kind of stuff going. Because I could shut it down at any time.
Oh, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's incredible how fast we can do that too. We could spend so long building trust and relationship, and then
and you can throw it away in one conversation, and then you're like, you got to rebuild it from nothing. It's like, and it is if you talk about capital, man, relational capital, financial capital, super important. It might be easier to go make back than relational capital when you lose it. Oh, it's hard. And a lot of times it can't be rebuilt if you do it really bad for a long time. And so I hope that's the other thing I shared in those one-on-ones in the transition with them is I said, I hope you'll show, I want to be a person that shows grace. I hope when I mess up, like you'll give me a few times, you give me some free passes. You'll come talk to me about it, but you're just like, I know you're trying your best. You just don't know what you're doing, kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'll be like, yeah, I'm kind of the guy who's like, we're all figuring this out as we go.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah, and to your credit, with how your faith story, I know you haven't shared that quite yet on here,
Mhm.
but with your approach of I'm just a guy who's following Jesus, who's trying to tell other people about Jesus, is really how you come across,
That's true.
and
Yep.
in that, your demeanor, your approach, your humility in that is known throughout, Christian circles throughout the area of
Mhm.
like, hey, do you know Rodney? It's like, yeah, he's our campus pastor. Well, not anymore,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I think that relational capital has been built, within the Goddard campus, but far beyond as well. And that, that's a great testimony to have going for you as far as like just how people experience you and the intentional work you've done to make that possible.
Well, it's like, I always say in churches, sometimes you don't have all the money, right? Nonprofits, you don't have all the money, but you can go build relationships. That's free. And in some ways, the greatest opportunities you'll ever have is when you go out there and you get to know people and you see how you can help them. I mean, it's what Jesus calls us to do, but it's not a strategy. Somebody accused me of, well, it's your church growth strategy or something a few weeks ago. I was like, it's not a strategy. It's the right thing to do, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, does it help you grow? Obviously, as opposed to you do nothing and you don't know people, right?
Well, if loving your spouse well is a manipulation, then
Yeah,
I don't know what to say.
yeah, exactly. So I was like, it really is a way for us to really extend the kingdom, but also, it's like there's a mindset I think that everybody should have. Is like, it's like I always say, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. So it's like he's just given someone else the stewardship for it right now. So in some ways, it's like there's things that I can help somebody with, but then it's always like I never go out and do that where I expect reciprocation, but it always comes back to you. I mean, it's something that always works through relationships. And it's not about the resources ever. It's always about that conversation and that connection that you have with the other person. And it's like that's how you move whatever you're doing forward, but you really shouldn't do it for that motive. I don't believe. Like
People sense it.
yeah, if you have an agenda, people do. I just generally want to know people and know their story, and I'm curious about their stories, because I know what God has done in my story. As I mentioned, family farm. I mean, I went to Kansas. I went to the great college of Kansas State University, have an agronomy degree. Go back to the family farm, and I'm farming for really full time 10 years. Did some part-time stuff at the church, but our lead pastor, I guess, saw something in me, started spending time with me, started giving me responsibility no human being should be given with my experience, and believed in me. And in some way, every step along the way, that it's like, man, God's been faithful and people have poured into me and I've had the right people around me. And it's been a crazy journey that it's like, to think that I mean, there's people that have trained and gone to school to do what I get to do. And for some reason, I'm the one that God has let do it. I mean, I'm humbled by that all the time. Every time I get up to preach, I just, I look out and I mean, Pat, you're going to 3 campuses, you're online, you got a room full of people, and you're just like, why in the world does a farmer from Mount Hope, Kansas get to do this? So there's like a humility about that. And I've always thought that everything was a gift. And so I want to steward that gift well. In the darkness, it's I got to earn it. But in the good places, like I can do that. And God, and the reason I'll never forget why I'm doing this. So I do know why I'm in my position though. It's because at every step along the way, I just know that Jesus has completely changed my life. I was super lost and he found me. And all I did was I just tried to be faithful and share Jesus with people and then try to care and lead people the best I knew. And I'm like, that's all I've tried to do every day for like 12 years, and here I am. So it's like, I ain't going to stop doing that. Like, that's what's got me here. And it's just being faithful. And then to know that God's put gifts inside of all of us when we put ourselves in weird stretching positions, you're like, holy cow, I can do that, And if you never put yourself in a place of discomfort, I tell people I've been uncomfortable for like 10 years now. Some periods of more comfort. I would say if you'd asked me the past 2 years, I was probably more in a period of comfort because I kind of done that before. We were entering, it was like, even though it was COVID, it's like, I kind of know what my job is. Now I'm extremely uncomfortable and I'm super excited like I haven't been for a while. And it's because that's where the reason I'm excited is not because of the new position. It's because when I'm uncomfortable, man, God grows me, And so that's what I'm fired up about. I'm like, man, when I don't know, when I come to the end of me, that's where he begins, And so that's the journey. I'm excited. Next year, man, I'm like, you're going to grow me a lot. I just know it.
That is, and it's so cool to hear you say that because, yeah, when we're in a comfort zone, it's easy to kind of fall asleep, and it's easy to kind of doze at the wheel when it's kind of boring and comfortable. Maybe not boring, but comfortable.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that is really cool to hear you say that because I've experienced it here too, where it's like, okay, when things are uncomfortable is when you go through the most growth because you have to lay it down and say, I have no idea what to do next.
Yep.
Or this ain't working, then what? Like you're talking about earlier. Talk about, and you've been kind of talking about the whole time, but succession planning. I mean, leadership development. What do you think has been the best as you've been receiving mentorship? And then also maybe challenges within that you guys have overcome?
Yes. So I tell everybody we're going through 2 transition plans at the same time. One I'm handing down and the other is being handed to me. And so it's I think there's just principles that I'd never really thought about that are painful, but I'm grateful that, it's so healthy, the way that it's been done. And it's a credit to Pastor Carter, our lead pastor, and Larry Wren, who really have thought this through, So I think if you're thinking about succession, you're really in your mind, you got to have a open hand about who this is, how this is going to happen. But you do need to have somewhat of a plan. And the thing that I'm grateful that they did, they had a plan, but really once they invited me in, they go, why don't you go make the plan? And I was like, that shocked me a little bit. I was like, so you're the leader, but you're telling me, and he goes, well, I'm not going to be for long. So you tell me how you want this to go. Here's my end date. And so for me, it really empowered me to think it through. And, there've been some tensions every once in a while, but man, Larry has just been so open-handed. I think the hardest part of any transition, I was like, it's because in our Western culture, we have these things called job descriptions, right? And they're like, this is my job description, but then there's really this other thing. This is what I really do. You know what I'm saying? Because what you really do is built around how you operate and who you are as a leader. Well, Larry gives me his list of what he does, and he is great at it. I look at that and I'm like, I'm going to be able to do that for about 2 weeks. And then I'm going to tap out. He has such an administrative gift where I would say mine is definitely much more on the inspiration, on the leadership. Larry is an administrative machine. I mean, he can organize, plan. I mean, it's just like he goes and it gives him energy. If I got to get in the weeds and administrate like in down there, I'm just, oh man, I mean, smoke starts coming out of my ears. I'm just like, I was really done. Like when we got the plan and the vision and all that stuff, I was kind of done, you know? And so that's the painful part is it's the same position, but it's got to change. And you have an organization, Larry's been in his role for 20 years. The organization's used to that position, doing it this way.
Oh, yeah.
And so just prepping people for the change of what it's going to be and the experience. And I mean, the team is incredible. I mean, they're open. I even feel like even the ones that maybe weren't quite as excited, maybe they're open, you know, but it's just one of those things where it's like, I even am not sure. Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's like Larry's last day is June 30th and everybody's like, what's it going to be like? And we're transitioning things, you know, over time. He's handing me responsibilities and things and I'm getting in there and I'm like, whoa, I'm going to have to do this different. And it's like, I don't even know what it's going to be like. I mean, I've got a plan. I don't, how certain of the plan I am. I'm like, it's probably 60% good, I think. But there's some unknown 40%. And so I think it does take a lot of organizational energy when you do a transition. And I think Larry kept saying it's going to take all the oxygen out of the room and it's going to be the focus. So it's like, this is what we have to do well for the next season. And I don't think when you have lots of transitions, you just don't take enough time to understand how big of a change it is from one person to the other. And because the gift set is so different, especially when you're talking about leaders really at the top of the organization, you know, and David's experiencing the same thing at Goddard. His gifting is different than mine. And so every day, this is probably like, I am really paranoid. I'm going to coach him to do it my way rather than coach him to learn what his way is. And I have to slap my own hand about every time I meet with him because I'm like, no, that's your way. He's got to find his own way. And you could really suffocate that because I'm his boss, you know? And it's just complex and you have to be really self-aware because when you're setting the tone for the new, man, I mean, you want to make sure you do this in a very wise way.
Yeah. I'm actually reading a book right now. It's called Never Go Back. And you know, I go through a 3 books a week or so is what it seems like.
Yeah.
I speed up on Audible, but it's called Never Go Back. I think it's written by Dr. Townsend. And one of the things he talks about is really taking inventory of who you are and to be you, not try to be somebody else. Cause that just breaks down
you can't.
And it can be catastrophic failures trying to operate as somebody else for an extended period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to take it as like, and I told my assistant this as I said, we're going to learn the old ways, and then we're going to change them. So it's going to be inefficient, but for the long run, it's going to be a lot better, you know. And I think I just know. I mean, intuitively, I know how different Larry and I are, but also when I see his schedule. Like I can't run his schedule, you know, it's like when you look at that and you're just like, I mean, by the time I get to Friday, I'm going to be like out of gas. And for some weird reason, his schedule gives him gas, you know, and I just have to be honest about that. And it does take when you're stepping into the shoes of somebody that's been there for a long time, you have to keep reminding yourself that that's okay. And he does that for me. He goes, man, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to do it like this. And then he'll joke. He says, I don't even want to do some of it like this. He's and that's kind of also the thing is like, there's in the transition, it's okay to do a great job of honoring what has been in the past, honor the person you're coming in for.
Absolutely.
But then also
their team will respect you for it.
Yeah. You honor them. And then you say, because of who I am as a leader, that's why it's going to be different. It isn't because, as I told somebody, it isn't because Larry screwed up. It's because Larry's a different person than me.
Absolutely.
And helping people discern that, because they can take it as, well, this was all wrong. Well, I'm not coming into a role where it was wrong. I mean, I'm coming into a very successful thing that it's kind of like you feel the pressure of don't screw it up, but you have to keep telling people that so that they don't get a false narrative. And you're not the savior. I mean, I think some people coming in and there's a temptation in my heart that's a little bit like that. We all have a little bit of there's only one savior. That's Jesus. I ain't him. I know that. But it's kind of like stepping in. It's like, I'm going to fix it all.
Right.
And the reality is when I fix one thing, I'm going to create a whole nother list of problems. So I think, I've been telling people there's no utopia. Like, I'm going to bring a whole nother set of problems. I may fix some of the ones because I'm different. It's like Larry and I have talked about maybe the vision and goals because of who I am. Maybe that's clearer. Maybe I lead more from that place better. And I go, yeah, but it could be a little crazy down here, down in when we're doing the administrative. So I've got to compensate for that. But just to know that that's probably the new discomfort for the whole organization. So,
yeah, when you start anything off, you're wearing all the hats, and then there's the ones that you can't wait to give away.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so Larry's got these hats that he's been wearing because the other ones he's given away. And then you're going to come in because you love probably wearing the hats that he gave away.
Yep. Yeah. The hats, I was like, yeah, we've talked about that a ton it's like, yeah, that makes sense, and I think even for, Todd Carter is my boss, it's kind of how churches are structured. You have the lead pastor who's in charge of the vision, mission, and direction, along with the elders, obviously, of which he's one. And then really the whole staff, the executive pastor, the staff reports to them, and we execute it. And so I also know for Todd, man, Larry has been with him for 20 years. I have to communicate a whole bunch with him just to be like, this, are we okay? Are you okay if I do this? Like, I'm checking in so much with him. Sometimes I think he's like, whatever, but I want to over communicate, especially early, because I know that I perceive, and I even think about decision-making different than Larry does. And I don't want a gap of daylight between us, and so that's an interesting thing. It's just change for everybody. And the problem is you coming in, I've got to change, but I don't really know how I've got to change completely yet. It's an organization's a living, breathing thing. And, we just completely changed something really important. We got a different, I would say we've got a different navigation system. And so what's that thing going to do? And I'm like, I'm not sure. We'll see, so.
Okay. So there's a few things I want to ask you about before we are done here. And you're really good at talking. It's awesome.
People always tell me it's a gift and a curse. So I apologize. And
It's
I love
fantastic.
talking about leadership. So I get rolling. I just can't stop.
I love it.
Yeah.
So a few things I want to ask you about is I want to ask you still about when, how you appreciate the importance of over communicate. Like, the reality is people are still, they have a sense of loss because they've been with Larry for 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
the people who've been there a long time feel a deep sense of loss.
right.
Yeah. It's like their foundation is disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so any additional disruption of that is only going to exacerbate it because then they're losing this thing they're normal to, or this entitlement, or this way of doing things, and they've got to change too. And so it is a big disruption. So I appreciate the over communication. I do want to ask you about, just fundamentally, how do you look at money? It's an awkward topic. People want to talk about a lot of things that are, risque, even in the workplace or with friends, but they don't want to talk about money.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if there's one place nobody likes to talk about money, and that's in the church. But the challenging thing is actually Jesus talked about money more than he talked to money and possessions more than he talked about anything else. And because he knows it really is a doorway into our hearts, one way or the other, either, our resources. So I would say, I'm actually preaching a message on this week because we're in the middle of a generosity series talking about really the heart of the matter is what we've called it. And what I really have found in my life is my checkbook and how I manage my resources is really the doorway to what is going on inside my heart. And people are like, what does that look like? And I'm like, man, look what you spend your money on. I'm like, good and bad. It is one of the greatest filters for what actually is going on in here. And I'm like, you think about addiction and stuff, right? Their checkbooks would tell you that. You think about family time, investment in your family. I could probably see that in your checkbook. I could see who you're like, who was that lunch with? Well, was that good? Or was that a plus or a minus? And so I think it's a both ways thing is we have to lead our hearts with our resources, but also our resources indicate the state of our heart. And so for me, giving and money, like I'm like anybody else. The story I'm going to tell this week is I sold some property that I've had, and I actually held on for about 7 years too long, and it created financial pain. But the problem, why did I hold on to it? It wasn't because of the financial investment. I held on to it because there was something in my identity that didn't want to let it go and do the wise financial thing, which is what I should have done like 10 years ago. But it just always reveals like where my faith is it's a report card. But then also if I want to change the direction of my heart, my finances have to really in many ways lead the way. And that makes people uncomfortable when you talk about that. And the reason is because they don't want to look like, who wants to look at their checkbook like that, but it's very true. And, and then I think, generosity and giving to me are so important because it's hard for me. And the reason I know it's important is because it's hard for me. And so I believe that God has, and I'm still a little bit active in the family farm. It is an admirable thing. Like it is to have a business that makes capital, right? But if that is your motivation purely, it's gonna, that checkbook's gonna tell me what you really care about. And so how you run your business, how that capital is, it tells me what you care about, Profitability is always important, but why is profitability important? Is it just to be profitable, or is there something greater and deeper, legacy, and not a legacy so people think you're awesome, but a legacy of what do you want to leave behind and how do you want to help and serve people? And finances are the greatest insight. I mean, I wish there was another one, but I think it's the number one indicator of all of those things,
Mm-hmm. When I was going through the navigators at K-State, one of the things that always stuck with me is if you want to see what's important to somebody, what they truly care about, you look at their calendar and their checkbook.
Yep.
Where do you spend your time?
Time and money.
Where do you spend your money?
It.
And I didn't think a scheduler would be a very profitable profession. But there are some people that are making a great living at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the money side really intrigued me, and that's part of what drew me into here because I get to sit down with people one-on-one and
I mean,
talk about money.
And if you can help people unlock that, and sometimes people get stuck, right? We we get in bad patterns where we're just like, I don't know, did that tell me about my heart? And I'm like, well, is your heart in a bad pattern? Yeah, it tells you about your heart. So it's like sometimes we obviously have to have people to help us get unstuck and to learn. And I think sometimes we also lead with the wrong thing. Um, the amazing thing to me, the interesting thing is elimination of debt does not increase generosity. Like that's out there in the nonprofit world. And it's just blowing people's minds that it's like the theory was like, if we can help people get out of debt, they'll give more. I'm like, no, because it's about the heart. It's not about the debt was about the heart, probably. Right. But also, where do I want, Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so you have to lead your heart, but also it tells me where your heart currently is. And to get out of debt, if you got free cash, sometimes that's, a lot of money is the worst blessing to a lot of people. I mean, lotto winners prove us that. And so it's like, it really is, money is a tool that can either be used for good or maybe somewhat neutral. I hesitate to say it's ever neutral. It's either good or not good, and even evil, And so it's like how we leverage it really does show us like not how good we're at handling money. It shows us the status of our hearts.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I saw it, let's see, when I was growing up, my dad had some neighbors that they didn't get along well. And, he's got the dents in his truck that are not on the top of it kind of deal going on. Yeah. So they did not get along well. And then he hit a jackpot of like $100,000. And within a month and a half, they were divorced. I mean, it was fast.
Yeah.
They were, money just amplified the reality of where they were.
Yeah. And I mean, I've heard, I can't remember who, maybe it was Dave Ramsey said that. I think I've heard several people. It's like, that's all money does is it can amplify who you already are. It doesn't change you. It just amplifies it. And so you are the one that's got to create the change. And I believe the Holy Spirit, obviously, from a faith perspective, it's like not much change happens outside of God. Like you can muster it for a while, like out of pure willpower and stuff. But man, the heart change long term, like I'm just like, man, my heart change, how God's changed me. It had nothing to do with willpower. It had everything to do with him really giving me a new one, and that's really what people are looking after. And it is a lie that people think if I just had more, it'd be enough. And we all know that's not true. We know that's true from I just spend more. That's what happens when I get more. I just spend more or I save more, which is weird. Where it's like, and that sounds much more responsible.
It does.
But it's like, why? Like, why? Is it about comfort?
Do we trust in money? Are we trusting in money versus trusting in God's provision?
Yeah, exactly. And then to say that it's like saving an investment, man, I mean, I'm pro. I'm all for it because I think it does. You put yourself in a place, God can use you in a much more powerful way if you're good at investment and you're good at saving.
Yeah.
But if you're just doing it for yourself, for comfort, you don't grow when you're comfortable. So it's like, how do you continue to understand the why? Why am I doing this? Just so that I don't have to be scared anymore. And it's like, I think we know in the world right now, if that's the reason you're not going to be scared, that might be, we got to do the best we can with the finances we have. But there's a lot of these financial things. It feels a little out of our control at this point. I mean, I can't control the price of gas. I can't control inflation. I can't control a war. And all of this is impacting my finances. So it's like, I got to be as wise as possible. But boy, if my comfort comes from that, I'm going to be disappointed, I think, especially in the world we're living now, And so planning is more important than ever, I would say, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking at your shirt, financial planning is more important than ever before, but don't put your whole faith and hope that's where your comfort can come. It can't just come from there.
Absolutely. And it's easy to give our confidence and our, I don't know, our what we follow over to the finances because it is so impactful and it permeates every part of our life,
It's a biggie.
and it can gain control of our heart.
Yep.
Yep. And that's when we're in a real precarious situation.
Yes. And I think the flip side of that is, man, when the people that I love and respect and know that God is, I think part of it's a gifting, but part of it is they've surrendered that part of their life to Jesus. Man, I mean, he doesn't always give them more. It seems like sometimes he does, though. The better he manages it. We don't want to lean too far. It's like, if I do it better, he's going to give me more. Like, that's really not what it's about. What it more is about is their mindset of, man, what he's given me, I'm maximum leveraging that for the good of what he wants. And when they do that, I mean, it's like, yeah, I'm praying God gives them more because they're going to keep doing that and they're going to change the world with it rather than I'm going to have 3 houses or something like that, Not that that's always bad. And some of them even have that, but they don't even see their resources as a way to obtain things. They see them as a way to move what God wants to do in this world forward. And even as I was talking to a person who isn't a person of faith, I was like, can you use your money to do good? Right? Can you use your money to do good outside of yourself? Like, that's a much greater mission than doing the good for yourself,
Yeah. And that's not an inspiring story to anybody, really. If it's why'd you start a business? Oh, to get rich.
Yeah,
Who
exactly.
cares?
Yeah. I mean, and even people that did that, like a lot of them either, they just kind of play it out
Yeah.
or they change.
Uh-huh.
Like, I've seen so many people change. I mean, I talked to a guy at church probably 3 weeks ago, and he's in that place, and he just said, man, I got all the stuff I need. Like, I don't know how much more stuff. And he's like, I want to learn how to do something with it. And of course I said, I'd be glad to help you figure that out, man. There's a lot of good you could do. And it's not just through our church, although I believe you can do a lot of good through our church all over the world. But I'm like, it's even more than that. It's that entrepreneurial mindset of even a bit. Could I start a new business to provide employment to 10 people? Is that good? Yeah, that's good, right? Not everybody can do that. And so rather than just sitting on it, let's go invest in some young entrepreneurs. If you don't want to do the legwork, give them your money. Let them go do it,
Absolutely.
So it's just a bigger mindset.
Yeah. And it's kind of like with the building, you got that thing that you guys were like, this is the thing. And you got there. And then you realize that, well, you have a building, more kind of like more money, more resources, more complexity is really what it turns into.
Absolutely.
And then if really you don't even, let's stop talking about it with the church for a second. Let's talk about personal finance. So when you've got the money or you've got, the ginormous house or, the Ferrari, it doesn't mean that life got more simple because you got more money. In fact, it probably got more complex
and more expensive
yeah. and on and on and on and on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, and there is some truth to, it's like, don't wait. I mean, in some ways I was thinking about when you were saying that, the church planner that I was talking to was, I said, don't wait to think you can't, when you get there. And I told him, I think you will. It's actually less free because then you have all this responsibility. Like right now, you're that entrepreneur that it's like, man, you're going to do the new thing. You're going to create the idea. You're going to do something that's going to create more wealth. Once you get established, it's more complex to do that, right? So when should you start? Don't start stewarding money. Don't start leveraging money when you have a lot of it. Like, do it now. That's how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people are always waiting. Leaders wait all the time, right? We're like, if we just get that thing, everybody else has this thing. It'll help us if we just get it. And it's like, no, it's like you're more nimble right now than you're ever going to be. And it's like when you get locked in, you know this, like you get locked in, you got an organization that's grown. It's a little harder to do something crazy now, you know? It's like it's scarier now. There's a lot more to lose, you know?
Yeah. And it's, long-term planning's great, but really it's so valuable to have a clear and accurate view of where you're at, what are your resources, what are your capabilities, who are you, whether it's an organization, leader, whatever, and what is the next faithful step forward look like?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you know where you're at, you got all you need. That's what I always tell people. You got all you need for this place if you'll just understand what you got. For sure.
And yeah, so final question, Rodney, how do you live the best life possible with the time you have left?
Hmm. Well, I just went through kind of a process of a life plan. And so it was in this transition, it was a part of it is our leadership. We went through that to try, and it looks at all these buckets of life, you know? And so it brought a lot of clarity to me, you know? So really my best life is a pretty simple life. It's got to get the complexities and all of that have to get, and I've simplified a lot of things is really that it's like the best life I can live is when I am pouring the best I have into my wife and my kids. And there's a tension, right? I'm taking on a big job. So it's like, am I going to have the best? Well, it's a tension I have to hold. But then also around my leadership, when I'm giving authority and responsibility to other people and believing in them and speaking the power, just into their life that God's given you the gifts to do that. Like when those two things are clear, no matter what I'm doing, it's like my tank, my replenishment tank is always full, you know? And it's really simple. So it's like whenever I get things outside of that and I add complexity, oh, it's bad, it's just never a good thing. And so the more I can stay focused on those two spheres, I call them my spheres of influence are those two things, no matter what I do. And man, it all comes into place, and obviously when you think about finances and all of that, like we just talked about, it better be pointing to those two things as well. Like that's my mission, and that's my burden. So if I can't see those in my checkbook, if I can't see those in my calendar, oh man, I'm not living my best life. It is all messed up, so that's something. And I am going to a season I'm more concerned.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
can I hold on to that? Cause I've probably over the last year made a lot of progress in that. And I think my wife would be the one to be like, I'm a little worried you're going to lose that too. And I go, yeah, we're going to have lots of focus on that. So to me, it's simple.
So I just moved, and even as something as simple as moving, I didn't even move very far. I moved maybe a mile,
Oh,
okay? But everything's different. It's not that different, but your systems are off. You're trying to relearn, and to your point on you're taking a big job, and a lot of things are going to change. That is often when we're at our most vulnerable because we figured out things that work well for us, but then that gets all shaken up and
yeah. Well, it takes a lot more energy.
Yeah.
And so you only have a finite amount.
Yeah.
And so you take it from somewhere else and you better make sure that the most important things, there might be a season where that's okay. Long term, that ain't going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, and thankfully it sounds like you're already on top of training people to make you self-aware,
Yeah. If I'll listen to them, that'll be the good question,
Mm-hmm.
I think, self-awareness, like even in this, that just the honest truth sometimes when you look at your spouse or you look at a close friend where they're like, you're seeing this, it's like, I know what you're saying's right. I don't know how to fix it. And so I think that's more the fear that I have is like, and concern is just trying to say that it's like, how I don't know that I'm in more of a place where I don't know how to fix it, you know? And so it's like, how do I hold those tensions well? And how do I make sure that in the long run, like 6 months from now, that it's like, hey, I've made some progress because it might be a little out of whack. You know, I'm not Larry. That's what I keep telling everybody. I don't know, man. I'm not Larry. So
Well, Larry has served Pathway well over the last couple of decades, and I am excited to see with your leadership how things change and what new growing pains we get to experience. And
yeah,
um,
well, I appreciate that, man. And it's great having you a part of our church, man. You and your family.
yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoy the relationships I've got there, and yeah, no, it's a great place to go, and really brings the community together. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you for planting that and being faithful.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today here on Real Wealth Podcasts. It's sponsored by Leading Edge Financial Planning, where we help people make wise decisions for themselves, their families, and we're here to help you live the best life possible. So thank you for coming on, and I really appreciate all that you've done.
Thanks, man.